Thanks so much for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to beat the video of Mike Harris reuniting that sea otter pup by any stretch. But I did want to take some time to talk a little bit about the risk that marine mammals pose to human health. And, you know, can we get sick through our contact with marine mammals? Those diseases that are shared naturally between vertebrate animals and humans are referred to as zoonotic diseases. And there are a fair number of them. There are at least 150 known to date. Probably the most notorious that we're dealing with right now is SARS-CoV-2, which appears to have come from a bat. But there are at least 149 others. When they evaluate those, it seems that in humans, 6 out of 10 infectious diseases diagnosed are zoonotic. I think it's important to recognize that a zoonotic disease does not indicate that it's a disease reservoir. It just means that that particular pathogen is shared between animals and humans. And humans may be the reservoir for the disease, transmitting it to animals, or it may go the other direction. Fortunately, for us that work with marine mammals, the human disease coming from marine mammals is pretty rare. And in a study that was published out of Davis several years ago, the most common folks that are infected with disease from marine mammals are going to be researchers, rehabilitators, lab workers, and I guess I would put it a fourth bullet down there, stupid people. As they try and contact marine mammals that probably don't really want to be contacted. Much more commonly, injuries occur rather than actual infectious disease. How do they get transmitted? Well, there are really two basic ways. One is consumption and one is through direct contact. And it was rather surprising to me to find that there are 87 different marine mammal species that are consumed by humans at this point in time. And that's a much larger number than I was aware of. And there are 114 different countries in which consumption of marine mammals is practiced. The one that through consumption is most important, and I'll touch on it a little bit more in a couple of minutes, is Toxoplasma gondii, or Toxoplasmosis. And as I said, I'll talk about that a bit more. Direct contact is the other way, and that's going to be through saliva, through urine, through feces, nasal secretions. If you come in contact with blood, just touching the animal, there are parasitic diseases specifically that can be transmitted that way. Obviously, bites and scratches, things like seal finger, and those folks who may be encountering carcasses on the beach and decide to do a little bit of exploration of a dead marine mammal. And then lastly, filed under that category of stupid people is this concept of kissing, like this snorkeler kissing seal in the wild of BC. Indirect contact is the third mechanism, and that's through contaminated surfaces like haul-outs and beaches. Aerosols from respiration are another potential cause or source of disease transmission. So getting too close to cetaceans as they breathe, it is possible if they have an infectious disease that it could be picked up and inhaled by a human. And then through water, particularly water in animals that are maintained under human care, but also in some of the lower latitudes where there isn't a lot of tidal exchange. Some of these little inlets that are associated with pipette haul-outs may end up with pretty high levels of potential pathogens in the water itself because there isn't a lot of tidal movement of water. I'm going to run through really quickly some of the examples, and this is not a complete list of the potential zoonotic diseases from marine mammals, just some of the highlights. There can be viral zoonoses, COVID being one of them, but poxvirus in seals. One of the more common ones that we worry about is going to be a zoonotic influenza virus. H1N1 that we were hearing all that hubbub about back around 2007, 2010. Many of the influenza A, which are the primary influenza diseases that affect humans. We can find influenza virus in pinnipeds, we can find it in cetaceans, and we can find it in sea otters. Norovirus that you may have heard about in association with cruise ships, causing a gastroenteritis and a very highly contagious disease, has also been found in the California sea lion, and it's been found in a juvenile harbor porpoise. So that's another potential infectious disease. And then the big one, the one that scares me the most, is actually rabies. And you know, these North American river otters, the little monsters that they can be, have been diagnosed with rabies. All warm-blooded mammals, or all mammals, are potentially susceptible. We just wonder how there could be exposure. It's not only been seen in river otters, there has been a case diagnosed in a polar bear, which I don't know if I would worry so much about the rabies killing me as I would the fact that I was bitten by a polar bear. That might be a bit more concerning. But the river otter gets a lot of press. There are newspaper articles frequently about river otters attacking humans on the beach. We do see them entering marine waters. I've been chased off my share of rocks in Prince William Sound by river otters. And in Maine, just a few years ago, there was a rabid river otter that bit a woman on the foot. And it was the first documented case in Maine. And the important part is, before that happened, Maine would say, we've never seen rabies in a river otter. And that's true. You never have seen it until you see it. So if we have a bite that breaks the skin by a marine mammal, rabies should come to mind as a potential problem. There are some bacterial zoonoses. The most common one is going to be mycoplasma or seal finger. That's probably not quite the finger that's being bitten in that particular image. But in that individual human, there was concern about mycoplasma infection. She did end up with a pretty significant laceration from that bite. Salmonella through the feces, brucella can come with contact with carcasses with respiratory discharge as well as reproductive tract discharge, tuberculosis. And then the other one that is probably the most common is going to be leptospirosis or leptospira. Leptospira are those little corkscrew-shaped organisms, have the potential to enter through damaged skin or mucous membranes and go systemic. It's shed in the urine, so we will find it in pinniped haulouts. There are really only a few fungal zoonotic diseases. Valley fever caused by Coccidioides or immitis can potentially be treated by humans, be contracted by humans. Most commonly, it's a threat to laboratory workers or folks who may be doing postmortem examinations on infected animals. Sea otters have been diagnosed with this disease rather commonly down in the Monterey Bay area, as well as up in the Moss Landing area. And it's going to be transmitted through contamination from the lungs and other granulomas that are system-wide. Lacasia loboi, this lobomycosis that we see in this bottlenose dolphin dorsal fin, this is a really, really severe case. More commonly, it is much less severe, like one might see in this patch caudal to the dorsal fin. But that fungus can be transmitted to humans through direct contact. So if we have an animal that is just marginally infected, may be involved with one of these swim with the dolphin programs someplace, it is possible for humans to get infected. And recently in the Pacific Northwest, there's been a dramatic increase in a fungus that's actually more of a yeast called Cryptococcus gattii. It's transmitted through respiratory secretions, and we've been seeing a dramatic increase not only in humans, but also in marine mammals, including cetaceans and pinnipeds. I did want to talk a little bit about the parasitic ones. You know, Giardia and Cryptosporidium are both gastrointestinal. They would be transmitted through direct contact with fecal material. Toxoplasma is one that's gotten a bit of press as a potential zoonotic disease, but I think it's important to understand that the direct life cycle, the predominant life cycle for this particular parasite involves a cat, either a domestic cat or a wild cat. Wild as in bobcat, mountain lion, lynx, that type of a wild cat. In those animals, the organism is actually shed through the feces as an oocyst, and then other animals may pick that up. Other animals being rodents, birds, domestic livestock like hogs or sheep and cattle, and they can then get an infection, but it doesn't complete its life cycle. In that case, we end up with a parasite that will insist in the muscle and just basically sit there. Sea otters would be another one. If they consume the oocyst that is shed by a cat through freshwater runoff, that particular parasite will insist in the muscle and just sit there. The only way a human can be infected by Toxoplasma under normal circumstances from a sea otter is going to be eat the sea otter. According to Stellar and Bering in their adventures into Alaska, sea otters did not taste good. So I wouldn't recommend it, but you're not going to get it through exposure to sea otter feces. You're not going to get infected through exposure to sea otter fur. The only other potential is in a laboratory setting where you may be encountering the parasite through a dissection. So, it's zoonotic by definition, but it's very difficult to transmit that particular parasite through the normal way. Most of the human infections that occur are either coming from oocysts shed by the cat, or they're coming through underprepared pork in particular. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour through some of the more common zoonotic diseases. As I said, there are a lot of them. Fortunately, not too many that affect marine mammals. I hopefully will be able to take a few questions, but if you have other questions that aren't addressed in this venue, there's my email. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll get an answer back to you as quickly as I can. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Jenna. It's great to see your smiling face, even though it's on a little tiny, tiny thing.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really wanted you to bring the information that gives like an extra tool in our toolkit to share with people why they should give marine mammals and other wildlife space. So we didn't even start touching on birds and all the other critters in the environment. And yeah, definitely gives me pause when thinking about even collecting a sea otter carcass back in my days when I could do that legally. Okay, do we have questions? Mike, you can go ahead and stop your screen share. And I know we have some questions.
We do. We have a question from Sharon. She says, do California sea lions and porpoise with norovirus manifest similar symptoms as humans?
They will, in that they have gastroenteritis. That was the presenting sign in the cases that were described, yes. So it is a GI tract disease primarily and shed through the feces.
Thank you. Next question, have there been any cases of river otters having rabies in California?
Oh man, I hate answering that question because the answer is no, knocking on wood very hard. So no, we have not. And we're very fortunate in that way. So no, not yet.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Erica says, thank you, Mike. I occasionally work on a whale watching boat and occasionally we have humpback whale breath blow across our boat. If we can smell it, I assume we're breathing in aerosols. Any thoughts?
It's a lovely aroma. Everybody should experience it. You know, I would argue the risk is very, very, very small. I think if you were aware that a whale that was approaching was not healthy, it was emaciated, I'd be a bit more concerned. But a free-ranging whale really lives on a razor's edge. You know, they've got to be Olympic class athletes. So if they've got enough infection to be contagious, I don't think they're going to be doing very well. So I wouldn't worry about it. You know, I will let others address the appropriateness of being that close to a whale. I guess if you're sitting there drifting and they come to you, it's a little different than chasing them down.
Yeah, maybe that should be our next campaign. If you are breathing whale breath, you're too close.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you smell it? Okay, thanks so much, Mike. I think we're gonna move on to our next speaker. And when we send out, and if you didn't jot down Mike's email, when we send out our list of abstracts, his contact info will be on there if you think of any more questions. So thank you so much. It was a great, really interesting talk.